Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's October. I love October. It's my birthday month, first of all, but also we are properly getting into autumn now. You know, in September you're still like saying goodbye to summer. You're still clinging on to some warm days. But October is like, we're here, let's lean into it. Let's get out the jumpers and the scarves and the boots and the blankets and eat pumpkin soup and all of that. Yeah, I am very ready for the autumn season. So what's going on reading wise? I am doing Chaostober this month. Now what is Chaostober, you ask? Let me explain. It all started 2 years ago and Danielle proposed to her friends. Danielle from Danielle Reads, who is hosting Chaostober. She said to her friends, what if I read only non-fiction for an entire year? And the friends were like, well, why don't you do it for just 1 month? And then we will join you with our own challenges. And so Chaostober was born. And this year, Danielle was like, why don't I let everyone join? So here we are. In Chaostober, you create your own reading challenge, your own reading chaos. Danielle herself is doing only reading whilst walking. I know there's people who do only eyeball reading or who are catching up on their holds from the library. Only reading books that other people have recommended, reading books only set before a certain time period, reading a certain number of pages a day. Yeah, you can make it as chaotic and challenging as you want. And at first I was kind of struggling with what I wanted to do because I kind of have self-imposed limitations on my reading every month anyway. Like in September I read only shorties, in August I only read women in translation, or like I'll play some sort of TBR game. So doing something like that didn't really feel that special to me, but I also didn't want to make things too complicated for myself. So I thought, what if I don't have any rules at all? Just read what I want to read. So my goal for October is to do only mood reading. What? That's crazy. Yeah, I realize that doesn't sound particularly chaotic, but mood reading kind of makes me nervous. You know, I like having some parameters. I like a prompt, and having complete freedom in choosing is kind of stressful. You know, what am I in the mood for? What do I want from a book right now? What if I picked the wrong book? Those are kind of frightening questions. So yeah, a month of mood reading it is. I picked my first book yesterday. Yesterday was the 4th of October, so I'm starting a little late because I kind of let Shorty September run into October for a little bit because I really wanted to complete all the prompts for that. And I was really in the mood to read a longer book. After reading all those shorties, I wanted to read something a bit more substantial, and the last book I read for Shorty September was Clear by Clarice Davies, and that was set in a rural location, so I kind of wanted a bit more of that. So I ended up picking How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn, which is set in a small mining community in Wales at the beginning of the 20th century. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I really love settling into a longer book and just getting to know the characters and the setting, and I don't know, just reading about a simpler life, I guess. You know, not simple in that it's easy, because the people in this book definitely face a lot of hardship, but they're sort of very local problems and not things like social media and world politics and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm quite happy reading this for now. I also went to the library and picked up some books that looked interesting. I don't know whether I'll read them, but I like having them here as options. So I got The White Girl by Tony Birch, which is a book I've been wanting to read. I think this is also set in a rural location, but like in the Australian outback, and it deals with the horrific things white people have done to Indigenous people. I also got Golden Hill by Frances Spufford, which is an historical fiction book, which is also something I'm kind of in the mood for. This is set in New York in 1746, and I remember a lot of buzz around this book when it first came out. And then also I picked up this massive book, which is Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard, which is like this massive family drama book. It's like the first in a series, and I don't know, I was going through the library and I was like, I'm really excited to read this. Right now I'm not sure anymore, like, do I want to get into this big series, but it's good to have it here as an option. But then there's also books from my own TBR I would want to read. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, right now I am still very content with this book. Welcome in my kitchen. The weather has been so sort of grey and gloomy, and there's been so many descriptions of food in the book I'm reading. Lots of home-cooked meals, lots of baking, that I decided to bake something myself. Although not exactly baking, I'm making Welsh cakes, which is like a griddle type of cake, so you just put them on a griddle or fry them in a pan, and they're delicious, or at least I hope they will be. This is what that looks like. You like make a dough and then you fry them in a pan or on a griddle, and they come out looking like that. I know they're looking a bit lumpy. The recipe called for sultanas or raisins, but I didn't have any of those. But I did have dried apple rings, so I thought that would be suitably autumnal, but it does make them look a little bit bumpy. But I'm sure they're going to be delicious anyway. In the spirit of mood reading and doing things I'm in the mood for, and also not doing things I'm not in the mood for, it's the 11th of October today, and I started a vlog for Shorty September that I have yet to post, but I kind of fell off track like halfway through. So like to finish it, I have to wrap up 3 more books. The last 3 books I read in September, and I don't think I want to. They were all like 3.5 star books, so not really books to get super excited about, but also not so bad that I had, you know, I could do like a good rant about it. And yeah, I've been putting it off for over a week now, and I just don't think it's gonna happen. And instead of feeling bad about it or being annoyed with myself, I'm telling myself it's okay. It's okay to abandon something halfway if you're not feeling it. And also, no one actually really cares, so don't make a big deal about it. I did want to show you that I have finished my blanket that I was crocheting in the first Shorty September vlog, and I figured you would maybe like to hear about it. So there she is in all her glory. I just need to pack it up and send it off to my niece. And I also wanted to share you one book that I did really enjoy in the latter half of September, and that was The Girls by John Bowen. And I think I'll just insert the clip that I filmed for that original vlog and put it in here. because I have it and more people should hear about this book, I think. So yeah, back to me a few weeks ago. So I finished The Girls by John Bowen, and this was brilliant. I had such a good time with this. It is set in the 70s. It's about this lesbian couple, Janet and Susan. They live remotely in the English countryside. They are quite self-sufficient. They have a big garden where they grow fruit and vegetables. They make their own cheese, and they have like a little shop by their house at a stall at a farmer's market where they sell cheese and jams and stuff. Since they live in a small village and it's England in the 70s, people are going to have opinions about two women living together, but also it's kind of a live and let live kind of situation. So they're quite happy where they are. But then one day Susan is like, oh my god, what if this is going to be it for the rest of my life? Maybe I'm missing out on stuff. And she decides to go find herself, and she books a solo trip to Greece. Meanwhile, at home, Janet is wondering if Susan is having a good time in Greece, lying on the beach, eating good food, doing painting or whatever. And then one night she's lying in bed and she comes to the conclusion that surely Susan is going to be sleeping with everyone, realizing that what she wants in life is anyone and anything but Janet. So the next day, Janet, she's kind of feeling sad and blue. She finds solace in the arms of another stallholder at the Graafdier. She's having a one-night stand with a guy, thinking, sex with men is not all that different from sex with women, until she realizes this guy does not know the concept of foreplay, and the whole thing is over before she realizes it. Susan comes back from her trip in Greece, and they both say that they had a horrible time apart, actually really enjoyed their life together, and they just want to pick it back up from where they left it. But Janet turns out to be pregnant, and that obviously changes a lot. Now, there is a murder in this book. It's not a spoiler, it says so right on the back, but I won't say who or how or what happens exactly. I will say it is the most cottagecore English keep calm and carry on murder I've ever read about. It's not about figuring out who done it, because you'll know. It's more about how it's covered up. The writing style of this is very no-nonsense, straightforward, and yet there is a murder and horrible things happen, but because it's told so matter-of-factly, it becomes very offbeat. It's very light-hearted in tone, so you're kind of reading along until you need to do like a double take and think, wait, what just happened? And yeah, it just really had me giggling in points, even though it deals with some serious issues. And yeah, I'd say despite there being a murder in this, it's at heart a love story of two people caring for each other, choosing each other, supporting each other during hard times, and it has a really lovely, heartwarming ending. Yeah, I'm very happy that McNally Editions took this book out of obscurity again, because I had a really wicked good time with this. So it's the 15th of October today, and I am still reading this book, How Green Was My Valley. I'm having a marvelous time with it. It's mostly character based, so not very plot driven. So I guess it's not like super compelling to read, but I really like being with the characters and the community and, you know, the Welsh landscape, and I'm totally fine with just taking my time with it. It feels the opposite of chaotic. I'm experiencing like a sense of calm in my reading that I haven't had for a while. So maybe it's not quite fitting for Chaostober, but I'm not complaining. I did in the meantime read the Handmaid's Tale graphic novel. I picked it up from the library the other day. I usually pop into the library when I go into town, even if it's just for browsing. And I perused the graphic novel section and came across this one. And then I read it over the weekend. This is based on the book by Margaret Atwood, and this adaptation is by Renée Nault. I've read the novel before, but it's been quite a while, like I'd say like 15 years ago. So I knew the general gist of the story, but I was a little fuzzy on the details. The Handmaid's Tale is a dystopian novel. It's set in the fictional Republic of Gilead, which is a state that has at one point overtaken the US government after like a medical emergency or like a virus or something that left a lot of women infertile, and the government collapsed. So in this new state, the majority of women have no rights and zero agency over their own bodies. There's an elite group called the Commanders, and then everyone else, all the other women are basically divided into women who are fertile or not fertile. And the handmaids are the women who are forced to have sex with the Commanders to have their babies, and basically are functioning as like an external womb for the wives of these Commanders who can't have children themselves. So yeah, like literal baby making machines. That's all they do. They can't have jobs, they don't have any possessions, they can't form friendships with other women. And in this book you follow one of the women, you know, what her life is like now, what her life was like before the state of Gilead came into existence, and also like can she find any cracks in the system. I really love the novel. I think when I first read it, it was one of the first dystopian novels I've ever read, and to me every dystopian book I read after that kind of gets compared to The Handmaid's Tale in my head, and I'd say it is heads above a lot of others. It's a modern classic for a reason. So I already knew I was going to enjoy the story, but I would say the graphic novel adaptation is done really well as well. I think the art style really fits the tone of the book. So it's kind of grey. There's some like flashbacks to like what life was like before. Like for example, this one that is quite colorful, so you can see like they really take a lot of the color away in the world that is Gilead. One thing I really noticed in this graphic novel as well, and I can't remember if that's really so clear in the book. Maybe it is, but I just can't remember it. But what I really noticed this time is how close this state resembles our current society. Like it isn't some really far-fetched idea. I think it becomes really clear in these graphic novels that they went from the US as we know it today to this dystopian state in just a few steps, and it's something that could happen if we're not careful and do not guard our rights, like the right to own and control your own income. It's not that long ago since we obtained that right as women, or reproductive rights. I don't need to tell you how easily those can and have already been taken away. So yeah, I really feel like this book shows that it is not that crazy or far-fetched that something like this could happen. The characters in the novel were living in a US like similar to ours today, and they didn't think something like this could happen, and yet there they are. You know, their lives weren't that different from ours before. Yeah, all that is to say that I think you should probably read the novel if you haven't, because I think it's more relevant than Margaret Atwood could have ever predicted. This graphic novel is also definitely worth your time, but I'd pick the novel if I'd had to pick one of the two. Alright, I have finally finished How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn, and I had such a good time with this book. It's the kind of book where I can see its numerous flaws. This book is far from perfect, but I just really loved reading it. This book was first published in 1939, and it's set in a Welsh coal mining town at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. The main character in this book is Hugh Morgan. He's the second youngest in a family of I think like 8 or 9 siblings, and we actually hear from his perspective when he's older, looking back on his childhood and growing up. Like I said, it is set in a mining town, and that really serves as a sort of backdrop to the story. You can see it going from this small tight-knit community to getting more and more industrialized. It means the town is getting bigger, more houses are getting built, the community is getting less and less close because there's more people coming in with different interests. The wages for mining are going down, so there's protests about that, and you know, there's growing pit heaps with waste from the mining that are literally changing the landscape and affecting nature. So that's all like going on in the background of this book. And the way the narrator describes all this is like a love letter to Wales. He loves the mountains, he loves the valley, he's proud of his hard-working family, he really values honesty and fairness and sticking up for what's right. There's really a strong sense of sticking up for the underdog in this book. Also at one point, Hugh, who is basically like the smart one in his family, is going to school as the only one of his siblings and basically the only one in this town. And he comes home telling about a math problem they had to solve, where the problem was someone is filling up a bath with water, but the bath had holes in them. So how long would it take to fill up if you were filling it up at this rate, but then water was leaking out at that rate? And then his mum is like, why am I sending my son to a school where they are teaching children to fill a bath with holes in it? You know, this is just the stupidest thing. And that is the kind of people they are. Very down to earth, very practical kind of people. And also, like I said, there's a strong sense of community in this book as well. Whenever there is something big happening, whether that is a happy or sad thing, the whole town just comes together, like an open house, everyone dropping in, preferably with a lot of home-cooked food and a lot of singing. Somebody getting engaged, they sing. Somebody died, they sing. Done with work for the day, they walk down from the mountains and they sing. What a sight! I mean, what a sight that must have been. You know, people singing hymns in the mountain with everyone joining in. I don't know if that is something they actually did in Wales at that time, but I'd like to think they did because it just sounds spectacular. And look, this book definitely is getting a bit too sentimental at points. The main character is reflecting on his life, back on his life, and the tone is very much one of romanticizing the past reminiscing on when life was simpler and, you know, the good old days. So it gets a little bit sentimental. Also, I think for a book without much of a plot, it was just slightly too long. I really liked the narrator describing his childhood and his teenage years, but as he grows into adulthood, I must say my interest started waning a little bit. And I think the charm in the first half is kind of the childhood innocence and that childhood wonderment about life. And I felt like it kept the same tone throughout the book, even though the person was evolving into an adult. It didn't feel like, in the way he talked about it, it changed. Yeah, I still really loved reading it, just because I liked being in the setting with these people in this location, but it just sort of meandered on. Yeah, far from perfect, but it really felt like such a comfort read. It has been a while since I've updated this video. I've had my birthday in the meantime. I am now officially 40 years old, which I wouldn't say is old, but I think is considered middle-aged, and somehow that sounds worse. I spent some days with my niece and my sister and her husband. They live near Amsterdam. We went to see the Frozen musical, which was super fun to do together. We visited the Rijksmuseum. I did some book shopping. The only thing I filmed was this little clip of church bells ringing. So let's take a moment to watch that. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that. I'll show you the books I got on my shopping trip in a minute, but first let me tell you about a book I finished. I was in the mood for some historical fiction, so I picked up one of the books I got from the library earlier. This is Golden Hill by Francis Spufford. It is set in 18th century New York, when it was still sort of a small bustling town, a British outpost, and the book starts when a young man called Mr. Smith, I can't remember his first name, he presents himself to a local merchant, Mr. Lovell, with a bill of exchange for £1,000, which was a huge sum of money at the time. He wants to exchange it for cash money, but he doesn't explain how he acquired this money. He doesn't say who he is. He's not saying what he's going to do with the money. So naturally, he kind of becomes the talk of the town. Who is this Mr. Smith? Is he a spy? Is he a fraud? Is he a philanthropist? You know, the tongues are just waggling. Now the book slowly reveals who the main character is and what his reason for coming to New York is. And it does so in a really adventurous, twisty-turny way. It has political intrigue, duels, riots, it has legal drama and gossip and romance. It really feels like this story is just constantly on the move. I think the writing style of this is really interesting. I've heard people say that it is written in the style of an 18th century novel. I don't know those well enough to agree with that, but I would say the style fits the story. It took me a couple of pages to get used to. It's very descriptive with very long run-on sentences, but once I got into the rhythm of it, I really enjoyed it. It makes it visually really stunning, the way the author describes New York at the time as a kind of a cold, muddy place where all sorts of people trying to build something like a small settlement sort of surrounded by wilderness. you really get the sense that it is a place where people are coming together, are kind of forced to live together, and are trying to make the best of it. And I love seeing that come to life in this book, and see kind of the beginnings of New York as we know it today. I really liked as well that this book had such interesting characters. I thought they were really well drawn out. I feel like they are characters that take you a while to like, or like you might change your mind about them. They feel very multifaceted and real, and I think the slow reveal about the different characters and getting to know them throughout the book is what kept me most engaged in the book. I also loved how the book concludes. It is the kind of ending where what you know at the end changes how you see what happened earlier in the book, which is not something I always like. In fact, quite often I find that undermines the reader and it feels like an easy trick, but I think in this case it is done really well, and it makes me want to reread the book and seeing how it changes my reading experience, knowing what I know now. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a very original story, very different from a typical historical fiction book, and just a good romp. So yeah, that was that one. Okay, now let me show you the books I got in my book haul. First I went to the Book Exchange, which is my favorite secondhand English language bookstore. It's one of those sort of long, narrow bookstores with creaky floors, and you can sort of like go up and down these narrow stairs to different rooms. So it just really feels like a great place to explore, but also not too big that it gets overwhelming. And I always find something there. I think especially if you're looking for modern classics and backlist titles, they have really great selections. So yeah, I got 2 non-fiction books that I have been wanting to read. One is Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls by T. Kira Madden. If you remember the Reading Women podcast, this was one of the books that they recommended a lot. And then also Eve by Kat Bohannon, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution, which I think was nominated for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction in its first year. And then I got a whole bunch of books by authors I've read before and really loved, and I've picked up books by them that I haven't read. So I got Pastoralia by George Saunders, which has a really fun cover, and these are short stories. I've read a short story collection by him before and really enjoyed that one, so keen to read this one. I've got Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. I've read Fahrenheit 451 by him, and I really like that, and this seems like a completely different kind of book, but I heard very good things about it. I've got Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. By Elizabeth Gaskell I've read North and South, which obviously I really loved as well, and I thought my TBR was really lacking in classics and Victorian literature, so that's what I took home. I got Life Among the Savages by Shirley Jackson. Love Shirley Jackson. This is a memoir, so non-fiction, which is an account of her raising her children, and I think it's going to be really good. I got Daphne du Maurier's Frenchman's Creek. Daphne du Maurier is an author I've read several books from and all really loved. This is one I haven't read before. Same with this book, which is The Ballad of the Sad Cafe by Carson McCullers. Also read and loved all the books I've read by her before. This is, I think, The Ballad The Ballad of the Sad Cafe is a novella, and it has a couple of other short stories in here as well. So yeah, that's the ones I got in the secondhand bookstore. And then I also went to the American Book Center, or ABC as it's also known, which is another English language bookstore, more of an indie bookstore. It was a little bit busy there, so I didn't spend that much time. I browsed the sale section because sometimes there are some real gems there, but nothing really stood out to me. But they also have blind dates with books, and I can never resist those, so I got 2 of those. So let's unwrap them together. So the first one is this one, and on the cover it says, "Daughter, autofiction, charismatic, inconsistent father, hero worship, and blunt yet brimming with metaphors." And I really love the quote that was on this book as well. It says, "It's hard to compete with adrenaline when you are a child. Children are the opposite of adrenaline. They are routine, grinding, and inexorable repetition. Any parents know this. Adrenaline is a tingling of freedom in the wrist, the imminence of chaos." Let's see what we got. Meanwhile, the battery light is flashing, so I hope I can do this before the battery runs out. Okay, this book. Oh, this is so fun. This is Lion by Sonia Bulger, which is a New York Review of Books book. And it's one I've never heard about before, which I always really love. I really like this. This is exciting. I've never heard about this book, and I'm excited to read this. And then I got one more, which has Wales 1950s, which is basically why I picked it up, because I'm all about my Welsh books these days. It says, "Academic from London goes back to home village. Social documentary, father-son relationship, slow-paced and meandering, and impact of change." So let's see which one this is. Okay, this is A Border Country by Raymond Williams. Again, a book I've never heard about before. It is a book by Parthian Press. It says Library of Wales on the back. It was first published in 1960, so like a little bit older. Yeah, this is so fun. I love that I got 2 books that I've never heard about before. I haven't heard about these authors. I haven't heard about these books. Very pleased with these 2 books, and I am excited to have these on my TBR. So yeah, those are the books I got. I am currently reading this book, Graafdier by Nikki Dekker. This is a non-fiction book, kind of a long form essay, I guess, where the author visits a nature area, like a nature reserve kind of thing that is actually quite close to me. She talks about the ways this area has changed throughout the years and centuries and ages by kind of mentally digging through the different layers of soil and earth and stone and rock and everything. And she's kind of philosophizing about how humanity has changed the earth, how we lost touch with nature and the earth, and how we can reconnect, etc. It's kind of a hard to define book, but I am really enjoying this one. October is officially over. Chaostober has come to an end. I have one more book to talk about, and then at the end I'll do some reflecting on the whole thing. So the last book I read was Days Without End by Sebastian Barry. This is a reread for me. It's the book I gave 5 stars on my first read of it. Now, I don't think I will give it 5 stars on this reread, but I still liked it a lot, and you know, I liked it enough for it to still stay on my shelves. This book follows two young men, Thomas McNulty and John Cole. We first meet them when they are teenage boys, around 16 or 17 years of age, and they pick up a job at a saloon where they cross-dress as women and they perform for the miners in that town. I forgot to say that this is a historical fiction book set in 19th century United States. And then later, when the work sort of dries up, they join the army. They fight in both the Indian Wars and the Civil War. And throughout the story, it becomes clear that they are more than just brothers in arms. They have a very affectionate and intimate relationship. Another part of this story is where they rescue a young Sioux girl. I'm using air quotes here because her family was massacred by the very army they were serving, but I will say that they do form a loving family, albeit a bit of an unconventional one at that time. And I think the unconventional love story in this is what I loved most about it. The first time around and also this time again, if I remember correctly, the author dedicated this book to his son who had just come out as gay at the time. And I think John and Thomas have a very tender relationship, and their love is just really portrayed very beautifully in this book. I also really love how gender fluidity was used in this book. The cross-dressing doesn't seem like a gimmick, and the way Thomas shifts from presenting as a man or a woman seems to flow very naturally. I think to have this relationship at the center of the book, sort of juxtaposed with the violence that is going on around them, is really what drew me in. It's almost like their relationship and their family is like a calm haven to return to. But something I did have more trouble with this time around than first time reading it was how very violent this book is. Obviously it is set during two wars, and even though the author uses very poetic language to do so, the book still describes very grueling scenes of battles and massacres. And yeah, it's just hard to read, especially when you read about women and children being slaughtered and not having a chance to defend themselves. That's really difficult and just really hard to stomach. And I think it doesn't help that it is written from the perspective of Thomas, who does realize in some way that what he's doing is morally wrong. It still doesn't stop him, and it's that kind of blind rage and the mob mentality that is so horrific in this book. I've read some critiques that the indigenous people in this book don't get a lot of agency or a direct voice in this book. I'm not sure I agree with the critique. It's true that they don't, but I think the fact that they don't is done intentionally, and to me it sort of emphasizes the terribleness of the book, of the story. But I do agree that the character of Winona could have been more fleshed out. She feels more like a plot device than an actual person, which is a shame, because I do think she could have been a really interesting character if we got to know her better, or if we heard from her perspective. I definitely had some more critiques on the book this time around, but I still really enjoyed it, and it was a very compelling read. So yeah, that was the last book I read for October. So now, how do I look back on a month of just mood reading? Was it as chaotic as it could have been? Probably not. I noticed that I am still a 1 or 2 books at a time kind of reader. I'm not someone who just reads a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and I don't like having a lot of things at the go at once. And what I enjoyed most about reading this way was sort of allowing myself to take the time with the book. I really enjoyed just reading 20 or so pages a day, and for that to be enough, For example, with the How Green Was My Family book, that really felt like a treat to read like that. And I know that sometimes books are meant to compel you more, and you want to read on to know what's going to happen. But I think with some books it is good to slow down, and it felt good to not have that pressure. And by that I obviously mean self-imposed pressure of other books that I have to finish within a certain time frame. And this got my mind in a twist a little bit, because I know I love reading slowly, but also there is so many books I want to read, and I want to get to those and also discover new authors, and you know, there's only so much you can read in a lifetime. But also I know I won't be able to read everything I want in my lifetime, so why bother so hard? So yeah, I keep on going back and forth in my mind. I think it's probably best to find sort of a combination of both and read the books at a pace you want to read them, which is not exactly a revolutionary thought, but I think it's hard sometimes not to be in a race with yourself, or to consider your TBR as something that you have to tackle. So will this mean I will only do mood reading from now on? Definitely not. I love TBR games and I love readathons too much. I love how they can be so creative and how they get me out of my comfort zone. But I think I'll maybe approach them more as a pick and mix situation in the future, and see them more as a guidance to my reading rather than a challenge. So yeah, that was my first Chaostober in a very non-chaotic way. Thanks again to Danielle for hosting this. I really had a lot of fun, and I think we should do it again next year. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.